For over 40 years, Attorney Chip Nix has experience in personal injury claims involving the most serious and catastrophic injuries. Helping victims injured at work, at home, or on the road is Attorney Chip Nix's mission. The law offices of Attorney Chip Nix is committed to representing clients with integrity and getting the compensation they deserve. This evening, Attorney Chip Nix discusses the legal issues that affect you most. This is Justice for You with your host, Attorney Chip Nix.
Welcome to Justice for You, where we talk about what you need to know if you've been injured or if you are being denied justice. Tonight we will discuss products liability. We will talk about things you need to do if you or a loved one has been injured by a product, and we will discuss some of the most important points in obtaining justice for you. Kent, thanks for being with me tonight.
Thanks for having me again, Chip. I enjoy these conversations.
Yes, sir. Kent, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I retired from the Alabama Department of Mental Health with 36 years of service there. And immediately after that, I went to work with Ms. Ellen Brooks, who was a district attorney at the time in her pretrial diversion program. Now I am really retired, enjoying spending time with family and involved in church activities and helping you
yes,
with
sir.
Justice for You.
I appreciate your help very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Chip Nix. I've been in practice in Montgomery, Alabama for a little over 40 years. I was born and raised in Montgomery. I went to Auburn to undergraduate school, Alabama to law school. I have a sweet wife and two sons who are out of the house now. Kent and I both appreciate being able to be with you tonight. We want to be able to help educate you about how to take care of the problems that we know how to do something about.
Chip, you know, in the topics that you discussed before, we've talked about workman's compensation, we talked about big truck wrecks, we talked about industrial accidents, those kind of things. And you know, all of us can potentially be impacted by any one of those. But the topic tonight, products liability, seems to me to be the one of the topics that could more than likely reach all of us in some way or shape, some shape or form.
That's true. The types of cases that come out of products liability are so vast and so different. There's so many of them. It affects every walk of life. It affects everything we do. For example, if you buy a coffee pot and you put that coffee pot in your house and you use it, and one night there's a short in the coffee pot that causes a fire and burns your house down, that's a product liability case. And you can imagine how many different kinds of products liability cases there are.
And Chip, I know as you've discussed the other topics, there is a way to best make sure that your needs are met when one of these kinds of incidences happens to you. Could you go over some of those steps as to how you're supposed to handle product issues?
Sure. The first thing that needs to happen is that we need to secure the product. The product is the most important piece of evidence in a products liability case. So take the coffee maker, for example. If the house burns, there will be some remnant of the coffee pot. That has to be secured. Not only that, but in order to find out whether the coffee pot is the cause of the fire, a cause and origin fire expert will have to go into the house and determine what the cause of the fire was and where the origin of the fire was. So it is so important for us to get involved in a case as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure this is the time, but when you made me think about this anyway, with coffee pot, you're going to have some warnings on there. And with every device that we buy, there are going to be some warnings that come with those devices. For example, it may get a weed eater, and it may recommend, I don't know if it does, but it may recommend you wear goggles or safety glasses. Right. What happens if we, the user, we don't follow those warnings?
Well, it's so important to read the literature that comes with the coffee pot. It's so important to read the literature that comes with the weed eater or the string trimmer. Those string trimmer warnings will say use glasses, protective eyewear. And if you do not do that and you lose an eye, then your case will be harmed. So it is important for your own safety to read those warnings and to heed those warnings for your own protection. Sometimes, though, the warnings on a product are not adequate. Sometimes they do not tell you what you need to know to protect yourself. So even if there is a warning about eyewear in a string trimmer package and you have an eye injury as a result of the string trimmer, you should contact us anyway, because we may be able to determine whether or not the warning is adequate. We would use what we call a human factors expert or a warnings expert to look at the warning and give us an opinion about whether or not it meets the standards that the manufacturer is supposed to comply with. We appreciate your watching Justice for You. We're talking about injuries caused by products. After this short break, we'll go over some examples of cases. Thank you. Hello, my name is Chip Nix. I'm here at the law offices of Chip Nix in Montgomery, Alabama. I want to tell you about a 20-year-old young man that we were able to help a few years ago. He lost his right hand in an industrial accident. We were able to provide a settlement for him that obtained two primary parts. The first thing we were able to do through the help of an artificial hand expert was to get him a bionic hand that really functions. And second, we were able to work with a financial company to provide, in addition to cash, $5,000 that will be paid to him on a monthly basis for the rest of his life. If you have a personal injury case, or if someone in your family has tragically been killed, call us. We will search for justice for you. Some people say personal injury law is all about the money. Well, they're right. It's about the money to provide a bionic hand to a young man who has lost one of his in an accident. It's about the money for a family who has lost a mother due to a drunk driver. Yes, for the law offices of Chip Nix, it is about the money. It's about the money to help people salvage a decent life from the wreckage of someone else's carelessness. Justice for you begins here.
For over 40 years, attorney Chip Nix has experience in personal injury claims involving the most serious and catastrophic injuries. Helping victims injured at work, at home, or on the road is attorney Chip Nix's mission. The law offices of attorney Chip Nix is committed to representing clients with integrity and getting the compensation they deserve. This evening, attorney Chip Nix discusses the legal issues that affect you most. This is Justice for You with your host, attorney Chip Nix.
Welcome back to Justice for You. Our topic this evening is products liability. If you've been hurt by a product, you may have a case.
Chip, as is usually the case, I always ask you this, and that is, you have such a vast list of cases that you've been involved. Could you pull from some of those cases to give us some examples of product liability?
Absolutely. One of the cases that we've already talked about on other shows is the case of the man who lost a hand in an industrial vacuum system that had what we call a rotary airlock valve. Caught his hand, pulled it up into the system. That is a product liability case. A lot of us think of products as being household products or medical products or other types of small products. But products also are things like industrial vacuum systems or machinery and equipment. The reason a product liability case can be successful is this. We have to prove that the product itself is defective. Defective means that it is unreasonably dangerous for its intended purpose. So we look at the products and we make a determination through the help of expert witnesses as to whether or not the product is defective. In determining a defect, we have all types of experts. We have mechanical engineers, electrical engineers. We have a lot of other types of engineering experts. In determining or looking at a product's liability case, we look at the manufacturer of the product, we look at the designer of the product, and sometimes we look at the distributors of the product. If the product has been changed in some way by a distributor and that change makes it defective, then we go after the distributor as well. Another kind of product would be a medical product, and I'll tell you about two different kinds of medical products that we've had cases on. One is a case where a lady had neck surgery and she had to have an internal fixation device in her neck. They put the device in, it looks like a little cage and it goes around your vertebrae, and there are screws that go into the cage that hold the cage to the vertebrae. Well, in this particular case, the screws backed out, and you can see an x-ray with the screws in the lady's neck, just floating around in the lady's neck. She had to have another surgical procedure, and that's a product liability case. The screws should not back out of a device like that. Another type of case I've been involved in is pacemaker litigation. At one time, and this has been a while back, pacemaker companies encapsulated the electronic parts of a pacemaker in epoxy. Epoxy is like a glue. It's a hard plastic type substance. With the epoxy encapsulation, you could actually look through that encapsulation and see the wires and other electronic parts of the device. But a pacemaker is supposed to give you a jolt so that your heart will beat at a particular rate at particular times. In this situation, what happened was that that body fluids were able to penetrate the epoxy. So body fluids penetrated the epoxy, which the pacemaker was implanted inside this lady, penetrated the epoxy and shorted out the electrical circuits in the pacemaker. It could not work, and there was a serious injury. So we handled that case. Another type of product is automobiles. There are a lot of product liability cases related to automobiles. One case we dealt with was a case where a gentleman had a car. It was a new car, and it contained a device in the engine called a PROM, P-R-O-M. That stands for Programmable Read-Only Memory. This device controlled the fuel injection. So electronically, the vehicle would tell the fuel injection system to put gas in so that the vehicle would go. But in this case, the PROM was defective. It failed to tell the fuel injection system to put fuel in. The vehicle stalled in an intersection and it was hit by a big truck and someone was tragically killed. That's another type of products liability case. Another type of case with automobiles is what we call crashworthiness cases. A vehicle should be able to withstand certain physical impacts without severely injuring the people inside. And so a crash worthiness case addresses whether or not the vehicle is defective, and in the sense that it is reasonably safe for people to be passengers. I'm sure you have heard of airbag cases. Well, a long time ago, I worked on a lot of what we called no airbag cases. This was a time when the automobile industry was trying to decide whether they wanted to put the airbags in the vehicles. So some of the manufacturers did, and some of the manufacturers didn't. There were suits that were filed against the manufacturers that didn't, because they did not put a safety device in that should have been employed. Now, the airbag cases are different. Airbag cases now relate to either the airbag not deploying or the airbag bursting upon deployment and not protecting the person. I've tried to give you some examples of products liability cases. I haven't given you nearly all of the types of products liability cases. There are so many. But if a product fails, frequently it's because of a defect in the product. It's because the product is unreasonably dangerous when put to its intended purpose. And you know, Kent, these are also times when people need to get with us as soon as possible.
That was going to be my question for you, because those are great examples of the types of different product liabilities that we can all encounter. I mean, Chip, the medical, the automobile, those are things that we're all experiencing, having experiences with every day. Now, again,
Right.
What do we do? What do we do if we have a product, any one of those products, fail us? What do we do?
All right. The first thing that you need to do is to make sure the product is secure. The product is the most important part of a product liability case. So the first thing we do, and it's important, if you will, to get us involved as soon as you can, first thing we do is secure the product. We also want to secure all of the documents that came with the product. For example, if the product is a coffee maker, it probably came in a box, and the box has words on it. It has different instructions on it. And inside the box, there will be all types of product literature. For example, there will be a warranty. The warranty is a very important part of the product literature. It's very important for us to have that. Now, sometimes we will not have it because it's been thrown away. If that's the case, then we can typically recreate it by either buying another similar product or by asking the company to provide it to us. But to secure the product and to secure the documents that come with the product are two of the most important things we do.
And you know, that's the example of the coffee maker is a pretty, you know, that's something we all deal with, and we have actually had our hands on those documents before. And I've learned now the importance of keeping that information. But what about a medical? What about the example you'd given with the lady who had the implant in her neck? What about that? How do you secure that documentation?
Well, this is how we secured it in this particular case. We first obtained the medical records. Then she had a surgical procedure to remove the device. Mm-hmm. We communicated with the hospital. We created what's called a chain of custody document. We picked the device up from the hospital. We had the hospital sign the chain of custody document stating that we picked it up. We signed the chain of custody document. We brought it back, and we are having it, or have had it, examined mm-hmm. by experts in that field to determine what the specific defect was.
And again, that's essential to being able to prove. That's essential to being able to prove whether or not the product was at fault.
We have to have the product.
Right.
Absolutely have to have the product. And in a medical case, we have to have the medical records, and we have to have any literature we can find with respect to the product. Mm-hmm. If you've been injured by a defective product, call me immediately so I can begin to gather evidence on your behalf. We will continue our discussion of product liability after this short break. Thank you. Hello, my name is Chip Nix. I'm here at the law offices of Chip Nix in Montgomery, Alabama. I want to tell you about a 20-year-old young man that we were able to help a few years ago. He lost his right hand in an industrial accident. We were able to provide a settlement for him that obtained two primary parts. The first thing we were able to do through the help of an artificial hand expert was to get him a bionic hand that really functions. And second, we were able to work with a financial company to provide, in addition to cash, $5,000 that will be paid to him on a monthly basis for the rest of his life. If you have a personal injury case, or if someone in your family has tragically been killed, call us. We will search for justice for you. I'm attorney Chip Nix, host of Justice for You. Justice for You applies not only to the clients we serve, but also to the community. At nixattorney.com, we provide answers to questions about personal injury with direct access to me and my associates. If you've been injured, contact me at 334-279-7770. Justice for You starts here. We're back with Justice for You. We've covered a lot of information already about injuries caused by defective products. There are a couple of other things we want to talk about before we break for the night. One thing is the legal standard in a products liability case. It's very different from a legal standard in, let's say, an industrial accident case or an automobile accident case.
You're going to have to explain that for us, because I think that need a little more explanation.
Yeah, okay. The legal standard is different in Alabama for products liability. Some states call the legal standard strict liability. Other states call it something different. Alabama calls it the Alabama Extended Manufacturer's Liability Doctrine. And that doctrine contains certain elements you have to prove, the most important of which is that the product was defective. That is, that the product was unreasonably dangerous for its intended use. You also have to prove, Kent, that the product caused the injury. So it depends on what your injury is, but that's also a very important part of it. Some people would say, well, what about warnings? What types of warnings are issued on products, and are they really valid, and do they hold up? The answer to that is yes, there are warnings that definitely hold up. Sometimes the warning is not adequate, but sometimes it is determined to be adequate. So it's very important to read the warnings. For example, there are warnings for lawnmowers about making sure that you don't get your feet up under the cutting blades and that sort of thing. But there are a lot of different types of warnings, and warnings have to be written in a clear and conspicuous and concise way. So sometimes the warning may not be good. It may not be a good warning, and we would get experts involved to say, okay, I've looked at this warning, and in my opinion it should have read like this, and our expert would write a new warning for the product And we would argue to the court that the warning was not adequate, the person didn't understand how to use the product safely, and therefore we would litigate the case that way.
You know, Chip, I just have to, as I'm listening to that, I'm thinking, you know, as many times as all of us use products like lawnmowers and weed eaters and those kind of things, I think I have become real lax in I know I've read the warnings, but I think what happens oftentimes is we get a little lax with that, and we get a little forgetful about being as careful around any equipment as we should be. But the warnings are there for a purpose, and the warnings are there to last forever, meaning that the product is only as good as we use it, unless it's faulty.
That's right. It's really important to read the warnings. Even on something like a lawnmower, we all know how to use a lawnmower, but sometimes there are new devices on a lawnmower. Sometimes there's a different way of operation of the lawnmower or the weed eater or the string trimmer, and it doesn't hurt to take a few minutes and read the warning. Mm-hmm. It's an important thing for you to do for your safety. Kent, let's talk about a couple of the different types of injuries that we've been talking about tonight.
Okay.
One of the injuries that occurs all too frequently are burn injuries. If the coffee pot is defective and it burns your house down and it causes you to be burned yourself, burn treatment is highly specialized. Birmingham, UAB, has a great burn center, but you need to get to some place like that because burn treatment is highly specialized, highly technical. It needs to be done on a frequent basis every day. There are all types of things that have to be done for burns. It is the most painful kind of injury I know of.
Yeah, if anybody's ever suffered that or known anybody who's suffered a burn, you're exactly right about that.
The other kind of injury I wanted to mention is brain injury. Brain injury occurs all too often. Sometimes people don't realize they have a brain injury. Sometimes they think they're okay, but they're not okay. It's so important to be evaluated and to be sure that the doctor knows what's going on with you. If you're having trouble with your memory, if you're having trouble with with irritability, if you're having trouble with any part of your normal mental abilities, please get checked out. Kent, we're finished for the night. Thank you so much for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, you can watch Justice for You Sunday nights after the news at 10. If you've been injured in an accident or at work, call me at 334-279-7770. Have a great night. Thank you.